Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the CHIC webinar in collaboration with Happy Energy and Freebridge Community Housing about unlocking eco-funding for property upgrades. My name's Adrian. I'm Head of Member Services at CHIC, and we're just going to wait a minute or two whilst everybody in the waiting room joins in. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of time for everybody to refresh and the screen come up so we can get started. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining. Today I'm joined by three, including four, if you myself, amazing people to talk you through eco funding. We have Adrian Wright from Happy Energy. We have Steve Elmore from Freebridge Community Housing, one of our members, but also utilising Happy Energy through our Healthy Homes framework. Jackie Leonard, Head of Member Services for the West here at CHIC, and myself, Adrian, Head of Member Services for the East. If we go on to the next slide, you'll be able to see exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So I'll do a quick introduction myself on CHIC, who we are, what we do. Moving then on to Adrian. That's right, there are two Adrians on this call. So hopefully it won't get too confusing. And he'll be talking through understanding what eco funding is and exactly how that can help with property upgrades. Steve will then go into the eco delivery aspect from a landlord's perspective, the challenges that they potentially faced during the process and what's worked well for them in collaboration with the contract through ourselves with Happy Energy. Jackie will then go into the challenges that they're facing with decarbonisation and what next steps we can do on how we can tackle that and what routes to market are available. And then last but not least, there'll be a Q&A at the end of the session. So for the Q&A, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. It's a speech bubble with a question mark in it. Please, please, please utilise that for any questions that you have throughout this presentation, and we will do our best to answer all of them at the very end. So very quickly then, let's go about who CHIC are and what we do. CHIC are a non-for-profit asset management and procurement consortium. We help our members procure contracts that are in line with the procurement regulations. So PCR 2015 and more recently PA 2023. We're governed by a non-exec board that are actually made up of our members. So our members govern and oversee what we do and ensure that we conform to the regulations accordingly. We have a number of different frameworks, which I'll go over in a minute. And each of our members have a dedicated head of member services for their region, which allows them to have that unique one-to-one contact with somebody, build that rapport and assist them in procuring the right contract for their requirements. We also work very closely with our supply chain to ensure that we have the best possible supply chain on our frameworks, and we're in constant contact with them to ensure that we're keeping up to date on what's happening in the sector so that we can advise our members accordingly. On to the next slide, where you can see sort of where our members are based around the UK. So originally based in Birmingham, we have expanded throughout the UK. So CHIC is now nationwide, helping our members across the UK. Membership is completely free to join. So anybody who is utilising public funds can join CHIC and utilise our frameworks and DPSs. There is no charge, as I've mentioned. So how we recoup our costs is through transaction fees on each individual contract. We have a wide range of members, over 300 members across the UK in a variety of different sectors, not just housing, but also blue light, government, etc. Our supply chain continues to increase with our release of new frameworks and, of course, our DPSs that we have. And as you can see, we're helping around about 3.2 million homes across the UK at the moment. And our live contracts and spend have increased recently, just over 900 live contracts with over £300 million worth of spend going through our frameworks and DPSs at the moment. CHIC is very fortunate to be recognised as a gold standard service. So what that means is that we have presented ourselves to Cabinet, ticking off a number of different citations that they have in order to get the gold standard accreditation. It just proves to our members and to our supply chain that we are verified, we are able to provide a high level of service, and that you are going to get the best procurement options for yourselves, public sector, housing associations, local authorities, and anybody who has access to public funds. Our new build framework, which was awarded late last year, is one of the first of our gold standard frameworks, and more will indeed come. As mentioned, our frameworks and DPSs cover a wide range of services. So we split our service offering up into 8 different sections: materials, building safety compliance, new build. I won't go through them all, but what that means is that we have a framework or a DPS for what you require. Through those 8 different service areas, we are able to help and support our members on every single aspect of social housing, which allows them to effectively have a one-stop shop through us to get all the requirements that they need. As mentioned, our membership is completely free, unlike other consortia out there. We're able to provide a fantastic service to our members by providing great savings through bespoke rates on our supply chain. We have great value for money on our contracts, which also reflects due to purchasing volumes, but also there is an element of social value, which I'll go through in a moment, which adds to that value for money. Our supply chain can be internal or external, and as mentioned, we cover the entire UK, so we are able to provide this service no matter where you are. Social value is something that is very important to us at CHIC, and all of our contracts must deliver a minimum of 1% social value. So this is monitored by CHIC. It is written into every single contract that goes through our frameworks and DPSs, and we ensure that the supply chain are delivering on that social value aspect. It can be more depending on what your requirements are, and it doesn't need to be monetary. If you're looking for something a little bit more specific, like helping refurbish a community hall, for example, then with the collaboration of the supply chain, we can help and assist with that into your contract. We also report our social value annually, and it's not just our contracts that do social value, but we ourselves at CHIC also provide our time to social value projects, whether it be with our members, whether it be externally, or whether it be raising money by doing charity walks. As an organisation, we pledge 10% of our fee income to social value outcomes through our charity CHIP, and this helps support an apprentice and a charitable fundraising events. You can also make additional contributions through the CHIP website. But that's enough from me, and from one Adrian, we'll move on to another. So it is my pleasure and privilege to welcome Adrian Wright from Happy Energy, who is going to speak to you now on understanding eco-funding itself and how it can help with property upgrades. So Adrian, over to you.
Thanks very much, Adrian. So I've had a look at the people who are attending today, and I think there's obviously quite a lot of social landlords, but there's also quite a few people from the industry, and hello to everyone that I know from the industry. Recognise quite a lot of names on there. Next slide, please. Thanks very much for CHIC for putting this on, and thanks very much to our friends and client Freebridge for also agreeing to be on this webinar. So what we're looking to do today is cover a whole range of different things within eco, from the basics all the way through to what's happening in the future of eco potentially, although that's still slightly unclear. So apologies for those social landlords that are already delivering eco, and those people from the eco industry that I know are on the call. I'm going to try and rattle through the kind of the basics. So, you know, how do you actually get the funding? How's the funding calculated? What's the property eligibility? I'll kind of try and push through those slides. But if anyone has any questions or wants to go through it in more depth, I'm happy to have a one-to-one call with a social landlord afterwards. So next slide, please. So about Happy Energy Solutions, so we are primarily a principal contractor. So over the last 30 years, we've upgraded over 300,000 homes. That includes about 50,000 in Australia. Many years ago, we specialise in partnering with local authorities and social landlords. Everything we do is about grant-funded works in homes. So we've been involved in PAS for a very long time. I say very long time, since it began at the beginning of 2020, when we began actually training up retrofit coordinators very early on and started delivering to those standards. We get very much involved in SHGF, Warm Homes, Social Housing Fund and local grant. And we try to use local contractors. And one thing I've made a note on the bottom, we try to be a fair partner. So some of you will be aware, or some of you will have worked with certain organisations that perhaps go in with a low price and then whack you with a load of extras afterwards. We're just not one of those organisations, or maybe they went in a high price and still whacked you with extras. But we try to work in partnership to try and develop a long-term relationship with our partners. We also have consultancy arm. So whether it's SAP modelling, just the provision of the retrofit services, retrofit assessments, retrofit coordinations, EPC plus assessments, which is essentially, it's basically not an EPC where someone drives past or doesn't look in the loft. It's drill and scope, it's checking for damp and mould when we're there, thoroughly going into the loft and then perhaps doing some modelling as well. So there's a whole host of services. That's about us. If I can have the next slide, please, and we'll crack on with the eco funding basics. So if you're a social landlord that's never been involved in eco before, but you've perhaps been involved in SHDF, you'll be thinking, have I got to apply for the funding? Is there a load of reporting I've got to do? Well, thankfully, no, you haven't. Generally speaking, if you're after eco funding, the energy suppliers tend to have the contracts with the Trustmark registered installers. So what you're looking to do is to try and find a trusted Trustmark installer that has access to funding, and they'll already have eco funding that they can spend in your property, and they'll be delighted for you to get in touch with them. Back in the day, years ago, social landlords could approach energy suppliers and get their own funding, but that seems to, I'm not aware of that happening at the moment, but it's not impossible. So essentially, you would partner up with someone, you'd send them a property list, they would do the analysis and say, we think you can do these properties, we think the works will cost this, we think the grant's going to be that. Do you want to go ahead? Generally they would undertake the retrofit assessment, because the EPR data they need to calculate the funding is quite key that they do that rather than third-party organisations, because if it's wrong, they may have to repay the money. They'll agree the works. I've made a little asterisk at the bottom to say quite often there'll be a certain amount of funding available. There'll be an indicative grant, indicative cost, but when the survey is actually done, you'll find that the EPC data you had was completely wrong, or it's based on model data. So sometimes it can change, but frequently the grant goes down. On occasions it will go up, but not very often. So the installer will do the works, and then they'll just come to you as a social landlord to ask for your contribution. They then deal with getting the funding, all of the paperwork, all of the reporting. So it's a very kind of low maintenance process from a social landlord perspective. So who installs the works? Generally, again, the installer will either have direct labour, or they'll have subcontractors. They'll normally act as a principal contractor, principal designer for all of the works. They need to be Trustmark registered and PAS 2030 or MCS, and obviously any government grant funded work needs to be delivered to PAS 2035 standards. If you specifically want to do the works yourself, you can have that conversation with the installer. You might have your own supply chain. It's not impossible. They could act just as a funder for you, or you could, as you could with us, if you've got a local SMEs that you want to be involved in the contract, they could onboard them into their supply chain, and you could use effectively your trusted contractors, but they would be contracted directly to the installer that has the eco funding. Next slide, please. Eco funding, how's it calculated? It's not straightforward, so I won't go into it in a huge amount of detail, but essentially you're looking for the pre-SAP rating and the post-SAP rating. Ofgem decided in their wisdom to split that down into bands. So you're looking at a low E, a high E, a low D, a high D. That's your starting point, and then you're going to a different rating. So you trying to get, it has to be above C when you've done the works. So it might be you'd be going from a low D to a high B, and it's the difference between that pre and post rating. Oh, gone whizzing past. We've gone back a slide. Can we go forward again, please? Oh, back two. That produces a Dean score, and they're calculated by and produced by Ofgem. So you can download those Dean scores. We can go forward another and again. Bit trigger happy on the on the keyboard there, Hannah. Thank you. So those eco funding and the grant is then split down into 4 floor areas. So homes that are below 72 square meters or below 73 square meters get slightly less funding than those that are above 200 square meters. So it's all relatively complicated. Once you've got your pre and post SAP, once you've got your floor area, you can go and look up the score on the Ofgem spreadsheet, the Dean score spreadsheet, and it will give you an annual bill saving, which is essentially what it says. It's the amount of annual bill savings that resident would benefit from for doing those works as calculated by the BRE. That's then multiplied by a rate. So let's say it's £20 per ABS, or probably being a bit optimistic in this current market. Let's say £15 per ABS. So you take your annual bill savings and multiply it, and that's how you get your funding. But as I say, that can change depending on what they find in the house. Grants can increase all the way to a high B. So unlike SHDF, you don't have to stop when you hit C, and you can go all the way to an A if that's your aspiration. You can get your property up to an A, but the grants will stop when they hit high B. And homes in rural Wales and Scotland get a 35% uplift, so extra funding. So very exciting for those social landlords in those areas. Next slide, please. Eligibility is relatively straightforward. So if it's a social rented property, it has to be EF or G rated as an EPC. It can also be D rated, but then there have to be innovation measures. And I'll talk about those in a moment. So there's no tenant eligibility, voids are okay. Sheltered housing, HMOs, temporary housing, as long as it's not, it's like a few months where they're staying there, they're all potentially eligible, but they get a bit more complicated, those type of properties. There's also infill, which could be quite interesting if you've got a block of flats. For every property you insulate that's eligible, you can do one that's not. So if you look at that solid wall or cavity wall, perhaps some of the properties are C, even if you own them yourself, they can be done as an infill property. And houses in the same street can also be done, but not for cavity, but for solid wall and district heating connection is what the DHS stands for. And that's the same for the GBIS as well, which we'll cover. Next slide, please. There's something called insulation preconditions, which is incredibly complicated, but it's really key that it's sort of understood when you're going to go ahead with the works. There's a requirement if you're doing any heating works, and that includes solar PV works, which is the big thing that's being done in social housing through ECO. If the home has an EPC of EF or G, there's a requirement that if the property has cavity walls, they must be filled either already or has to be done as part of the works, and all roof areas have to be insulated. So whether that's flat roof, pitch roof, room in roof, or just a standard loft. But if you're solid wall, timber walls, party walls, none of those have to be done. If it's EPC D, it gets more complicated. So if you're doing works, you either have to do one of these measures that are listed, one of these insulation measures, and it's basically every insulation measure apart from loft insulation. You have to do one alongside the work, or all of those things, if they exist in the property, have to already be insulated. And that basically means building regs 2010 levels. So kind of 0.16 U value. The one thing that's missing from that list is standard loft insulation. So ironically, EPC-D homes, you don't have to worry about doing the loft insulation, but you have to do all the other ones. So homes that are quite difficult under ECO. So if you've got properties you're looking to do ECO on, if they've got non-standard roof, so if they've got a room in roof, you're going to have to insulate the room in roof. Flat roofs are going to have to be done. So it just really adds to the cost. Sometimes you have a bit of sloping roof. And again, they're all really difficult, expensive things to do. So sometimes you can do those outside of ECO, ahead of the works. D-rated properties, I mentioned above, you have to either do one of those works or they all have to be insulated. So with a solid floor, you can generally get away with not doing it because there's a whole host of reasons why it should be an exemption. But for a timber floor, you're probably going to have to pull the floorboards up and insulate it because it should be cost effective. And gas heated homes, generally the grant's going to be quite low. So you're typically looking at electrically heated or non-gas homes. Next slide. So innovation measures. So these are measures manufacturers effectively that have gone through an energy supplier. They've gone to Ofgem and they said, we think our product is innovative. We think it does something that other products do. We think it saves more money than another product that's equivalent. We think we've got a way of doing something that's quicker, less hassle. The product's more environmentally friendly. So you take it to Ofgem. They put it in front of what they call the TAP, which is held every 2 or 3 months. And they look around and they look at the information and they decide whether they think it is innovative and whether it meets the criteria for either a 25% standard uplift, and this is 25% extra grant funding if you fit this product, or a substantial uplift, which is a 45% uplift. And depending on the measure, that can be quite substantial. It could be an extra £3,000–4,000 per home. Now, these are mandatory for EPC-D homes in social housing. So these are the types of measures you'll have to fit. Happy Energy, ourselves, we've put applications in partnership with these manufacturers. So UK Sol and Anglo Solar, so it's a British solar brand. They come pre-fitted with the Tego Optimizer. I'll talk about that in a minute. The Trianco Activa heat pump, a really excellent R290 heat pump, very high efficiency, can be set at high temperatures. That means you don't necessarily have to change your radiators. That has just been successful in a 45% uplift, which means you get 9 free services. So effectively, if you fit that, you get a 10-year service plan alongside. Or you can go for a 25% uplift, which is a bit cheaper to buy, but you don't get your free servicing. And we also have EWI Pro, DuraShield Pro, which is a very high impact external wall insulation, mineral wool or EPS. So from a social housing perspective, it can withstand sort of 5 times the impact of a standard system. Next slide. So some of you will have non-social rented properties. So that might be full market rent. It could be key worker properties, intermediate rent. Those properties are also still eligible for eco, but then it becomes the eligibility of the resident or someone in the home. So those type of rentals are classed as private rented, which means it has to be E, F and G. So you can't do Ds for those. In shared ownership, that's classed as owner occupied. So actually that's D, E, F and G. And that opens up in the owner occupied sector more measures than a rented property. In these instances, someone living in the home, just one person, has to be on an income related benefit, or they have to be signed off by their local authority under something called EcoFlex. And that's generally a household income below 31,000 or some kind of illness. But there's no resident eligibility for infill homes if you've got properties that you want to bundle in like a block of flats. Next slide, please. Which measures can be installed? It's pretty much all of them. You've got gas first time central heating, that's for E only, and district heating connections. Again, that's E only, and that's primarily because they're not going to be eligible to be innovation measures. Storage heaters are only eligible if you install solar PV alongside. You can also install solar PV alongside high heat retention storage heaters, and that's because they consider the combination of the two to be a renewable heating system in the same way that a heat pump would be. But all of these measures, there's various criteria that comes along with it, but these are the kind of the core measures you can install under ECO. GBIS, Great British Insulation Scheme, is just insulation. Next slide, please. So solid wall insulation, the drop-in warm home social housing fund grant cap to 7,500 has pretty much, I would say, killed the market for solid wall insulation. There are some people that are going to be doing it, but it's much more difficult than it was under SHGF Wave 2. But there's a really good opportunity for solid wall insulation because the energy suppliers have got a minimum target they have to hit, and they're looking for solid wall right now. So between now and March next year, and potentially a bit further on as well, if you are looking to have solid wall, whether that's internal or external, then you need to be looking at eco. because you're looking at a 50% contribution or more, but the overall grant is likely to be potentially higher. You've also got, again, the infill opportunities. You can use mineral wool if you want. There might be an additional cost. And obviously there's things like the EWI Pro system if you want to get perhaps a bit of extra funding through an innovation measure. Key as well, almost forgot. It doesn't have to hit EPCC. So normally under ECO, the properties have to hit EPCC, depending on the partner you work with and the funder that they work with. In some cases, they're happy just to get the solid wall insulation. So you could take a D-rated property, install EWI, for example. It won't reach a C, but that's okay. You can still have your eco grant, and then you can take that property and carry on delivering some work through Warm Home Social Fund. And that's one of the only times generally you can mix the two, because normally they both have to get to a C. Next slide, please. Some example eco grants. Now there'll be some in supply chain probably on here saying that seems a bit low, that seems a bit high, probably that seems a bit high because the rates are a bit all over the place at the moment. But here's a couple of simple examples. So a standard 3-bed, 80 square meter semi-detached house. On the left of the screen, you've got a home that's already well insulated. It's already got high heat retention storage heaters. It's a SAP 67, which makes it high D. And we're going to install 8 solar panels on the south-facing roof using the fantastic UK Sol or Anglo solar panels that are innovation measures. So that's got us to the high B. So the eco grant, based on an indicative rate, is about £8,000. And then you get a 45% uplift, which is an extra couple of £1,000. Now that uplift will vary depending on the angle of the system. So if it's north facing, for example, that would drop by about 40%, as you'd imagine, because there's less generation. So on that particular property, kind of 8-panel system, south facing, a real nice straightforward job, about £10,000. That will cover the installation, the PAS retrofit coordinator, retrofit assessment. So it's fairly decent funding. They're not all like that. Obviously, different size houses have different grants. On the other side, we've got the same house, but it's a bit a bit less well maintained. It's only got 100 mil in the loft. It's got empty cavities. It's got old storage heaters. So it's starting at a SAP 51. So this is what we call high E. So in this case, as part of the Eco Works, we'll be installing all of the things that are missing that are on the other property. So we're putting the new storage heaters in, the solar, we're doing the loft, the cavity, we're going to have to do ventilation as well. But because we've taken it from a lower EPC to the same EPC rating, the funding's higher. So you're looking at just under £15,000, which probably isn't going to be enough to fully fund the job, but it's a significant chunk towards the cost, and it's way more than the 50% that you'd get from Warm Home Social Housing Fund. Next slide, please. So eco partnerships, avoiding pitfalls. I'm probably going to get, if I could see the supply chain on the call, I'd be perhaps getting some daggers looked at me at the moment. But one thing we'd say is don't allow installers a free rein on your properties. We've had social housing partners in the past that we've come to do some work, and they don't really know that they kind of just let installers, here's the property list, go off and do your best. And they don't know which properties are being done, EPCs are being lodged, particularly with SHDF. We were coming across properties where we found them, we were ready to put PV on, and then we found that actually an installer had nipped in and done some eco works on it that we weren't aware of, and it kind of catches you out. EPC fraud has been fairly rife over the years. So be really careful if you're going to share data with an installer. If you share all data, which could incorporate EPC C or above, just look out for them coming back to you and say, oh, yeah, we're going to go and put cavity wall on this property, when you know it's already a C, because there's a potential that of manipulation of EPC data or EPR data as it is. So we'd sort of suggest that you get involved, you ask for copies of the data so you have that on file so you can see what's being claimed. We also work on an open book basis. So we make it clear what the annual bill savings are, what the funding is, what the pre and the post SAP is, and we have a table of rates through the CHIC framework. So on this property, we're going to install solar PV. The cost is this much. Here's the funding. Happy days, there's £1,000 left over. That could be carried over onto another property where you're having to make a contribution. If you have no idea what funding is being drawn down, you might think it's fantastic because it's free, but you potentially are missing that extra funding that could be spent on other properties. So try and get a handle on exactly what funding's coming through. And as I mentioned there, try and agree the installation costs separately to the funding. Make sure it's a reputable installer. It sounds straightforward, but we've come across some quite large social landlords that seem to have just run roughshod over their standard procurement procedures and have just said, here's some data, go off and do some works, not checking health and safety, quality, financial background, operatives qualifications, and you will have some quite vulnerable tenants. So are they DBS checked? So try and, even if it's free and it's not effectively being procured, just consider that, the same processes that you would normally get involved with. Products, what heat pumps are they putting in? What solar PV panels are they? Are you happy with those? What warranties are you getting? Are they using innovation measures to make sure you're maximising the funding? Other things, there's a lot of solar PV going in at the moment, and we're really careful to try not to put inverters in lofts because of potential for fire and overheating. If they do go in there, it's walk boards, lighting, smoke alarms that are linked to other smoke alarms. Otherwise, we'll try and fit them somewhere else. PV inverters, have they opted for one that has arc protection? There's been a number of fires on roofs and because of DC connectors not being connected properly. So for the extra 30-40 quid that arc protection provides on the inverter. So it's again, don't let people just go and fit anything. And a bit of a bugbear of ours, the safe isolation. So making sure that you send in an authorized SIP provider to install a proper isolation to the property, not just pulling the mains fuse and upsetting the network electricity operator. And legal consents, so DNO applications, building control. Is it a listed building, conservation area? Is everything been done as it should be? Next slide, please. Have you? I mentioned on a post about having a magic trick to make a home a C that's currently an E for less than £100. And this is, I mentioned it earlier about EPC data. Prior to Eco 4 starting, lodged EPCs had to be used, and Eco 2T through to Eco 3, so that's about 4.5 years worth of EPCs. To be eligible for Eco, it had to be EPC E or below. And I've lost count of the number of social landlords we work with, but I've gone into their data and found a huge swathe of EPC E properties and thought, fantastic, they're great for that bid that we're doing for SHDF Wave 2. And then we've looked and they're cavity wall and they've got gas boiler. Some had solar PV. So there were something like 20,000 EPCs that we found just from the 3 years in Eco 3, and this isn't all of them, there's loads more in England and Wales, where they were EPC E lodged, but previously had an EPC of C or above. So if you've got quite a large stock, and if you've got EPC E properties that are cavity wall, gas central heated, I'd go and look and find them, because the chances are they were C or certainly are C now. So that's a really cheap way of just bringing those properties up. The other thing to look out for is lodged EPCs where they didn't bother to go in the loft, roof insulation as built, because they couldn't be bothered to get the ladder out. So there's some really quick wins to help get some Cs. So of those 20,000 properties I was talking about in Eco 3 that were dodgy, on the right hand side, that's the top 40 areas. So if there's anyone on the Teams call who has properties in those local authority areas, you might want to go and check your stock just to make sure that none of those properties belong to you. Next slide, please. So what's coming next for Eco? So Eco obviously finishes at the end of March in 274 days. This slide is just to represent what happened when Eco 3 became Eco 4. It took 448 days to go from DESNZ publishing their consultation to Ofgem publishing their final consultation. Eco amendment, which is a relatively minor amendment when GBIS came in, that took 267 days, and a very minor amendment took 224 days. So we're running out of time, and there's been no consultations about what's going to happen at the end of Eco 4. Next slide, and I'm getting close to my time. Thank you. So they were originally talking about a 2-year extension to Eco 4, possibly called Eco 4I, and then possibly a 10-year scheme after that for Eco 5. But now it's really close to the wire, and what we're hearing is they're probably going to have to do a 6-month extension, and I think maybe even that might not be long enough. So from April onwards, you might get 6 months of exactly the same, and then maybe an 18 or 20-month period after that. But there are suppliers that are hitting their targets before the end of this calendar year. So if they don't do something soon, the supply chain might be in trouble. So in terms of social landlords, I'd try and get hold of some funding now as quick as you can while it's still available. Other potential changes I've mentioned about the EPC is bugbear of mine and fraud and things. So in the new scheme, not so much in the interim scheme, but in the newer schemes, they might be kind of getting rid of that scoring by EPC ratings to avoid the gaming and the gouging of the funding. They're pushing PV, air source heat pumps, storage heaters, possibly batteries, although they reduce your RDSAT rating at the moment. Low insulation will be covered alongside those things. There might be less solid wall. So again, now's the time to get in and get the solid wall. They might look for working with local authorities, area-based, and also interestingly, they see lead generators earning lots of money and having absolutely no liability whatsoever for what they're pushing off to organisations. So, but maybe them and managing agents might be coming under the spotlight. About time too. Next slide. So this is my last slide. So this is just really, if you're interested in free solar PV, then please get in touch. My email's at the bottom there. So what we're looking for potentially is EPC deal below homes, either with storage heaters, heat pumps, or electric boilers, although not many people will have electric boilers because of the running costs. All those things can be installed, or the top two things can be installed alongside the solar PV. Because we use the TECO optimization panels, they're very safe. They prevent fires. They've got rapid shutdown and monitoring that's included as standard. And there's also solid wall funding. I mentioned the 50% funding. And there's also still an opportunity, even though GBIS is kind of being watered down very heavily, there's still an opportunity for free cavity wall, possibly loft alongside. And if anyone's interested, if they want to send us their stock data, we'll analyze it and we'll let you know. We'll find all these potentially ones that you can turn to see for next to nothing, and then we'll give you a proposal for how we can actually deliver eco-funding works and typical costs. And if it needs a direct award, obviously we'd be delighted to do that through CHIC. And that's it. Thanks very much. Adrian, back over to you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Very, very detailed presentation there from Adrian at Happy Energy. Couple of key points for me really quickly. He was able to explain to you exactly how we can get eco funding, what you need to do, what you need to look at and analyze in order to be eligible for eco funding. And a lot of information there about the innovative, I can even say the word this afternoon, measures that are out there to help increase the SAP rating of your properties, and a lot of little warnings as well of things that you might come across whilst sifting through your data. Before I move on to the next speaker, Steve, I just want to remind everybody of the chat function at the bottom. The Q&A button is the button you need to press. It's the speech bubble with the question mark in it. Please do put your questions in there for the team at the very end. A couple of questions already come through during that, so very, very nice indeed. Please do keep them coming in. And the slides and the video of this presentation will be shared with everybody after the call so that you can review, watch back, and share with your colleagues. It's now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who unfortunately seems to have disappeared very quickly from the call. Technical issues there, I assume, there from Steve at Freebridge Housing. So what I will do while we wait for Steve to rejoin is just to give you a little bit of information about Freebridge. Freebridge are one of our CHIC members. Freebridge approached us a while back to have some help and support in procuring a contract for eco delivery alongside other decarbonisation works. And it was through CHIC that Freebridge Housing got their contract with Happy Energy to deliver these works. So it's thanks to the communication between ourselves and Freebridge that have helped put the two organisations together and allow them to carry out these works. Just like that, Steve miraculously returns. So I can now hand over to Steve, who's going to explain from a landlord's perspective the experience Freebridge Housing have had in delivering eco. So, Steve, over to you.
Thanks, Adrian. And Adrian, apologies, internet gremlins kicking me out. Yeah, just to give you a brief overview of our experience in sort of real world terms. It's great hearing from Adrian, but sometimes it's good to hear sort of from the forefront, from the delivery, how that affects us and how that works. We can move on to the first slide. Obviously, as social landlords, we're always looking for ways that we can increase the number of homes that we can make more energy efficient. We have limited budgets in there, so anything that we can obtain funding for to make that money go a little bit further, ultimately improving our homes, but the lives of the tenants that live in those. So utilising funding such as Eco4, GBIS and Warm Home Social Housing Fund allows us to have a much bigger impact in terms of that as well. In terms of learnings, as we've gone along, we've delivered a number of properties as part of the project with Happy Energy. And one of the key things is to select your delivery partner. Selecting the right delivery partner is key in there. We've had conversations in the past with numerous delivery partners in there. Some didn't align with our way of thinking. Some supply chains were questionable. One thing that drew us towards Happy Energy is their professionalism, that transparency, willing to work with us, listen to our ideas, what we want to achieve from our properties, and working in a way to achieve that. That's logical. But someone also who has that experience of delivering on scale as well. Within the social housing sector as well, there's obviously a lot of nuances within the social housing sector, so understanding how that works and some of the pitfalls and challenges that we come up against within there as well. Also, one of the things, they've got the knowledge and skills within their teams to sort of supplement our teams to deliver successfully. The next one of the key learnings is when it comes to property selection. It is gathering as much data as possible on your properties. Obviously, data is key. The more quality data that you're able to provide to a partner such as Happy Energy to allow them to do that desktop-based exercise as a starting point to give the potential measures that we can install, identifying the most suitable houses in terms of getting the most bang for our buck, but also having the biggest impact in there as well. In there is key. From that, we can then look to start engaging with tenants from that point and completing retrofit assessments. But also, we're fully aware that there are always challenges within social housing where there's limitations in terms of gaining access, tenant buy-in. So it's really important to have a good bank of properties that you can sort of fall back on if you inevitably will have a few dropouts within there. Once you've identified those properties, the next phase is having that engagement with your tenants and starting that as early as possible. One of our key learnings from the projects we've done is actually starting that work before you want to deliver. So you've got an idea of the properties, you've done that desktop-based exercise in advance. So you've got your bank of properties ready to go, introducing them at the first point that you can. And then rather than being in a position that you've got the funding and then you're starting to build that process, you're starting to do those desktop-based exercises. It's these tenants that are living within our homes who ultimately are the success of our projects here. It's their buy-in. So the earlier we can engage them, we can answer their questions, we can make them feel comfortable in there as well. And it's really key to listen to them and understand their needs as well as what we want to achieve and the reasons why we're looking to achieve things and how it will affect them. Also working with a delivery partner that's knowledgeable and experienced, it's understanding the requirements of that particular funding stream to maximise the amount of funding and improvement outcomes that's achievable. Adrian mentioned in terms of the innovation measures, so being able to tap into those to gain that extra funding in there by installing those measures as well, along with selecting the right measures within those properties as well to bring those up. We can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So Resident game we've spoke about is really key, really key. It's one of the most important factors of success within terms of these sort of projects. It not only does it build that trust with your tenants, it builds that relationship with them. You can offer them consistent support throughout the process, which leads to improved outcomes from there. As I said earlier, start that engagement as early as possible. Introduce the delivery partners that you're going to be working with, the benefits to them of what we're looking to do, why we're looking to do it, what not only the benefits that will have on that home, but how that will affect them in their everyday life. Whether that's we're looking to reduce running costs in our home by insulating our home, putting solar panels on the roofs, whether we're upgrading heating systems, how that's all going to work and how that's all going to affect them. Face-to-face conversations, really key. Without those, we would have lost some of our tenants in there as well. By having that sit down face-to-face with those tenants that are sort of on the edge has been really beneficial in there. Listen to their concerns and questions, be flexible and adaptable. There will be tenants that sit on the edge, that are unsure. They've heard misconceptions around various things. They don't want the disruption to their home. They don't understand what's going on, so they have to give them as much as possible. It might be a case that actually you've got a long-term project. You can move a tenant from one phase to the next phase so they can see neighbours having work done and what is involved in there as well. Speak to them and understand their individual needs. Like, a lot of this information you'll have already as a housing association in terms of any health conditions, physical needs, language differences, things like that. By having all of that information, it enables you to go in and engage with them and understand what they need. It might be that they need support in preparing for the works in terms of garden clearance, moving furniture ready for installation, or it might be simple things like they know that they have mobility issues, so placing a radiator on one wall may impact them being able to move freely about their house. So it's having those conversations early on so that we avoid any problems later on. And that's really key to engage with delivery partner and contractors in those conversations as well. Obviously, our tenants, we speak about the measures that we're going to install day in, day out. So we've got really good understanding of what we're looking to install and understand how it works. A lot of our tenants don't. They've heard hearsay here and there. They may know somebody who's got a heat pump. They may not know anybody. So it's providing all that information in a clear, understandable format, really. It's like there's various ways that we can do that. It's some people like spoken word, so we can have those conversations with them, whether that's face-to-face or on the phone. We can have leaflet flyers that we can put in with simple, easy to understand information in there. Brief video snapshots as well, sort of 1 to 2 minute bite-sized videos accessed via a web page or a QR code to sort of explain how a solar panel works, what's involved in terms of having a heat pump installed, all those sort of things. We can put things in different languages as well. That supports them as well. It's just supporting that different demographic and needs of the tenants in there as well. Another thing that we've found that's been really key, and one of the great things of working with Happy Energy, is to have recognisable people and points of contacts, not just with ourselves as a social landlord, but also with our delivery partners as well. And that's been really key. Happy Energy have been able to provide us with a dedicated local recognisable phone number that we've been able to provide to our tenants who can call, and they'll get through to dedicated members of the Happy Energy team who deal with our project day in, day out. So they're not calling through and having to explain things time and time again. There's also dedicated email addresses just for our project as well. We have a number of tenants who won't answer the phone to unexpected numbers, unknown numbers. So by aiming to provide them with that understandable local number has been really key. But as well, continue to gather the feedback during the process as well, both positive and negative, not only just for future learning, but also it makes the tenant feel valued and a key part of the journey, which helps make things run smoother. And as I said earlier, it helps to build those relationships with the tenants, and can also, if you've built those relationships, can lead to that collaboration with those tenants at a later stage to deliver case studies in there, which again will support you in terms of being another tool to be able to assist you in future projects as well. We've been able to do some visual case studies, and we've been able to do some video case studies alongside by building these relationships, which have been really valuable in terms of promoting this to future participants. If we're able to move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. And so there's a number of obstacles that you sort of come across within these sort of projects. And fortunately, a lot of those can be resolved fairly quickly with the right approach and problem solving. But it's dealing with the right problem solving, and in sort of house teams working with the delivery partners and contractors, that's why it's key to get these relationships with the delivery partners, selecting the right delivery partner with the contractors as well in there. However well you plan and learn from previous projects, there'll always be something new that comes up and needs addressing and tackling in there as well. But by having a strong team in there, most of these things can be resolved fairly quickly. It's also understanding your properties and your tenants. Is that, have we, the tenant living in a certain property, have we had a history of access difficulties to the properties? How have we overcome those in the past? Can we use those again? Have there been previous refusals to energy upgrades in terms of heating supplies and things like that? So how can we work to avoid those refusals? Working closely with in-house tenancy teams, having those dedicated conversations with tenants, understanding their needs as well. When we spoke about health conditions, mobility issues, it can be mental health conditions as well that can really impact people as well. You also will have the tenants that have lived in their home for a long time and don't want any change. And it's being able to have those conversations to try and explain the reasons why we're moving forward, except that you might not always be able to convince everyone to have the works done. But again, we've found it really important to record the details of these refusals for future monitoring and to move forward in the future. I've said a couple of times about the tenants' needs. Understand their medical conditions. There can be a number of medical conditions that affect their understanding, their ability to cope with change and disruption, where equipment can be placed, things like that as well. One of the ones that we've had that we've dealt with really, really well with Happy Energy has been, we've had a couple of tenants who have suffered with quite severe COPD. So a real impact of any works that we do is creating dust in their environment, which severely impacts their COPD. So we've taken approach. We had those early conversations with Happy Energy and our contractors within there, and we've come up, and in discussions with our tenants, we've come up with a plan of works and program to support them to be able to deliver the works, and it's worked really, really well. We spoke about whether they need any assistance to prepare for the works taking place, such as help moving furniture to allow for installations. They need support with clearing the garden to allow for an air source heat pump siting or scaffolding to be erected. These are all things that, having these conversations, you'll only find these out by having conversations. It's where we can support them in-house with our teams or work with our contractors to offer support as well. Be realistic about the level of disruption that they're going to experience to their homes. We have questions: will we need to redecorate? Will we need to put new flooring down? Can they still live in the home while work's going on? Be clear and honest with what the making good process looks like within your project. Be honest and upfront. If you're only going to fill the walls and put some white paint on the wall, then explain that so that we're setting those expectations early on. You know, tenants will also have preconceived ideas around things such as heat pumps. We've had the negative information that they've heard around heat pumps being noisy and expensive to run and not being able to provide enough heat to heat a home. These tend to have come from hearsay or conversations they've had with units that have been installed ineffectively in the past. So again, it's having those conversations, explaining how we do things, the process of what we're doing, ensuring our house is thermally efficient before we complete that work. Be realistic about the timescales. If it's going to take X amount of time, be clear from it's going to be between these timescales. Tenants want to have as much information as they can. They want to be able to plan, and they want to be able to move forward in there. There's also going to be supply chain issues. We're sort of a rural and coastal housing association, which throws up its own challenges. One of the challenges that we've experienced in the past in previous projects is with our coastal properties, the requirements for coastal specific air source heat pumps and equipment that have a coating for the salt in the atmosphere as well. This led to a longer lead time. This was unknown at the start of the previous project that we were doing, but we've learned from that. So we've had these conversations at the start of this project. So we've been able to factor in those delays if there are going to be any, or look at alternatives, supply chain solutions in there as well. Each property can bring different challenges in terms of gaining access to areas where siting of equipment can be placed, limited wall space to put heaters, things like that. But again, it's having those conversations and having a good working relationship with your delivery partner and your installing contractor as well to find solutions for these as well in there. Communication from contractors can be mixed. I'm sure everybody who works within social housing has experienced good and bad. I certainly know that we have within our projects we've done as well. But it's one of the key frustrations for our tenants is that good and bad communication. They like the communication. When we're going to come and deliver on this day, we're going to do X and Y on this day, we'll be here at this time. But then when we have tenants calling us up saying, we're expecting installers to be here on this day at this time, no one's here, where are they? Unbeknownst to us, the installers have had a change of plans. They've just not communicated that. So we've got tenants taking days off work, things like that. So it's ensuring that all the good and the bad is communicated. Most of our tenants are very understanding, but they just want that clear communication within there as well. All housing associations will be different from us. But as within Freebridge, we have a very limited team to be able to deliver retrofit works and run these type of projects, which is a real challenge in itself for us. And without the support from Happy Energy bringing their skills and their teams in to sort of bolster ours and bring their expertise in, we'd be unable to successfully deliver projects on scale that we are with them. So it's being able to use their expert knowledge and experience within their teams. They've also got a robust network of excellent installers to deliver work smoothly that they've used in the past. So we know that we're going to get good quality works in there. And they've been able to assist from the whole process from start to finish, the identification and selection of the most suitable properties, ensuring that the measure mix we're looking to install is going to be the most effective for that property, being able to help with that management of those contractors and the final lodgement and documents that are required to ensure that we achieve all of our funding. Hopefully it's given you a brief overview of our experience from a social landlord's perspective, and if there's any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and then we can answer those at the end. But on a whole, it's been a fantastic, really positive experience from our point of view. We've had some really, really excellent feedback from our tenants following the completions of the work, making a real difference to their everyday life by saving them money and giving them a warmer home to live in, which ultimately is, for me, and I'm sure a lot of people, is what we do our jobs for, is to make a difference to those people living in our homes. And I'll hand over to Jackie. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Lovely. Thanks for that. So yeah, so mine's going to be quite a short presentation. I'm conscious of time here, but I'm going to begin with giving you some context to the decarbonisation of social housing and the scale of that. So if we just move on to the next slide, please. So, you know, with a fifth of all CO2 emissions coming from residential housing, that's a significant amount, and it means a lot of work is required. And in particular, given the government's target, which is a legal target to meet net zero by 2050, then there's an awful lot of work to do. I think there's work in progress. I think we'd all say there is some good progress being made. But I suppose the question then is around the pace of that progress and to meet the target by 2050. So when you look at that, and I think one of the biggest things by far is the actual the challenges around the cost and where that money is coming from. If you look at the bottom of that slide there, big discrepancy between what the government estimates that cost to be and what the housing sector estimates are in terms of the cost per property. So when you look at that figure at the bottom there, between 100 and 250 billion pounds, it's a question of where all that money is coming from. So I think that's a webinar in itself, and I'm going to leave that one for another day. But yeah, next slide, please. So just picking up on some of the lessons that we've learned today. I'm not going to read through those. I mean, these are particularly focused on continuous improvement sort of subject matters, but I know we recognise that there's already a lot of achievements to date and some really good innovation. The three key things for me, which I got down, which have already been mentioned, a couple by Steve, which is data, absolutely key, and tenant engagement, again, right at the beginning and through to get that engagement and those projects successful. I think he also picked up to mention that in the main, decarbonisation projects can be and are quite complex. They're not like a sort of kitchen and bathroom refurbishment program. There's a lot more to them, and I think that's a sort of, that complexity requires quite a lot of thought and consideration and resources to deliver successfully. I think just to sort of add with those that Chick can help with a lot of the things that we've got on the lessons learned slide. So whether that's sharing your pipeline of works with us so that we can look to see how we can combine some of that work, or looking how we can get better value for money, then that's something we can do. I think we've got another slide on lessons learned. If you just move on to that one as well. And I think just to mention from this slide, really, that we have engaged with quite a number of members on the damp and mould bit. So we have been supporting members there, looking at that damp and mould approach and linking that in then with the Fabric First and strategic asset management planning and delivery. So that's a good one there. Next slide, please. I'm sorry if I'm going at pace, but conscious of time. In terms of our sort of solutions for decarbonisation, then just first of all to say that we have got a number of routes to market. We've also got an M&E framework that was recently launched, and within that includes heat pumps and ventilation. We do have a number of DPS solutions that also focus on healthy homes. And just to mention, we do have a set that are specifically for Wales. But today I'm going to focus on our Healthy Homes framework. That was launched last year and runs until 2028. As you can see, there's three core lots there. Our consultancy not only covers the sort of the expected aspects you'd see within decarbonisation and retrofit, which is your sort of retrofit consultancy services, whether that's assessors or coordinators or designers, but it also encompasses the wider asset management sort of functions as well. And that's anything from sort of the strategic asset approach right through to sort of stock condition surveys and works like that. In terms of the lot 2, which is actually delivery of the works and services, then we have Fabric First, we have M&E, which covers the usual heat pumps, PV, solar and battery, and ventilation solutions. And our turnkey solution is one that is for the end-to-end process. So for those contractors that are able to deliver the sort of consultancy bit at the beginning, as well as the works right through to the end. And our digitisation is around data analysis and reporting platforms and smart sensors. Up there, you'll also see how each of those lots have been priced for and in terms of those models. But it's a comprehensive framework. So if you are interested, please do contact your head of member services for your region, and they'll be very happy to talk through the different options with you. So in terms of, next slide, please. In terms of then making an appointment through the framework, so we have 2. So the first one is a direct award, so that's a call off. There's the creation of a robust business case, so that business case details the reason for the direct award to a particular supplier, and that's something that we can help with. So that's obviously a quicker route in terms of appointment, and is often used where a member has an existing relationship with a contractor, or it needs to be urgent, more a faster route if you've got deadlines to be met. Time frame, as I say at the bottom there, is it from week, and it kind of from 3 weeks. It does depend on, in a sense, the information to pull together the contract pack. So yeah, next slide, please. So the other option obviously is a mini competition. So this is where you are testing the market. The benefit of this is in terms of creating bespoke tender pack that meets your requirements. So whether that's through the specification and the pricing and the quality questions, or within that tender pack, that means you can tailor it specifically. You can also then look at the cost and quality split depending on your preferences. So it does allow that flexibility, and it does mean you are testing the market. Chick, again, can support you through the whole of that process from the beginning to the end. And we can also provide full support in terms of developing that tender pack. So we have a team that sit behind the sort of member services. So we've got our commercial team that will create the contracts. They can review and develop pricing models. And we also have our I've forgotten now, our sort of specialist team that look at specification. That's the word I was looking for, sorry. Our specification team that can review and develop specification to members' requirements. And then we obviously have our procurement team as well that helps support that procurement process for us. So I think that's back to you, Adrian. That was very quick. Sorry, I was conscious of time.
No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Steve, beforehand. So some very clear themes between all three speakers this afternoon. Data is extremely key. All three have mentioned the importance of data and how making sure that you're utilizing desktop exercises and reviewing your data to make sure it's as accurate as possible, and trying to weed out any erroneous data sets. Resident engagement is the biggest across all three of our speakers today, making sure that you're getting that engagement with the residents early, building that rapport, building that trust to help make the project go a lot easier throughout the term of the project, and indeed past the project completion. And finally, communication, not just with your residents, but internally within your teams, with your contractor, with your supply chain, to ensure there's that constant flow of information, tackling any hiccups along the way, so that you can keep the project moving as swiftly as possible. We have come to the end of the presentation. Thank you all very much. We do now have some questions in the chat. I am conscious of time, so we may not be able to answer all of these questions, but we will get through a couple of them before the webinar ends. So what I'll do is I'll pose the questions out that we've got in the chat, and I'll share them out between our panelists. So one for Adrian first. Happy Energy. You've mentioned that batteries are currently reducing the SAP score, the RD SAP score. Are you able to just give a brief explanation as to why?
Yeah, it's not always the case, but certainly things like batteries aren't performing as well as you would expect in an EPC, nor are PV diverters. And that's because they split the fuel costs between full SAP and RD SAP. Essentially, RD SAP assumes that half the electricity is used in the home and half is exported, but the price that they use in the RD SAP is the same to export as it is to import. So in effect, there's no benefit. If you use a battery to store half of that electric, you're only offsetting the export that you would have generated at the same value. So we've done a few different models. Some might go up a little bit, some stay the same, but certainly your PV diverters, they're going down. So if ECO were to carry on the basis of doing things to get a SAP increase, then something expensive like a battery just at the moment isn't really moving the dial. So unless they change the criteria and just say we'll give you X thousands of pounds or a score of this for a battery, if it's still linked to SAPs, that will continue to struggle to stand up as a cost-effective measure.
Thank you. Steve, one for you now. as a landlord. So there's been mention in the slides about the potential for having to top up the grant funding. So just really briefly, from your perspective, have you had to do that? And if so, what's the process? How do you go about doing that?
Yep, so we've had to do that as part of our Eco4 project, which is where we come back to having that really robust data set and performing that desktop-based exercise that will highlight the properties that you're looking to deliver and the estimated amount of funding you're going to get and any contribution that's likely to be needed as well. So you can factor that into sort of your budget requests and things like that. In terms of how that is then paid, that is then through Happy Energy. We pay them, who then pay the contractors for that.
So a bit of desktop exercise there, and then understanding from there what you may.
It will highlight where you are, and you get those quotes through. They're obviously desktop-based exercise, never going to be 100% accurate, but if you've got the right information going in, you can get a pretty good picture of where you're going to be, so you can factor in your budgets in there. So in advance when you're building budgets in terms of your business plans.
Thank you, and apologies to everybody on the call where the sound has, after being told the sound has gone a little bit funny for everybody, so I do apologise there if it has on your screens. Steve, just one more for yourself. When you do get to that stage where you're at the point of delivering, but the funding that you've received may be a little bit less than you were expecting, how do you go about in that scenario?
Yeah. So again, for us, how we've worked that is we've built a contingency into our initial budget from that desktop-based exercise in there as well to allow for sort of any increases in there. Having said that, we have seen some increases, but we've also seen some properties come in that are requiring less financial input from us as well. So it's sort of quite circular in that way in there, but yeah, always build in a bit of contingency in there.
Lovely, fantastic, thank you. Jackie, final question goes to you this afternoon. So you've said that obviously there's a number of different frameworks that our members can utilise and award to. There's a number of people on the call here that potentially are not members. So what's the easiest way for somebody to join CHIC, and who can join CHIC to become a member to take part and to utilise these services?
Right. In terms of becoming a member, thanks, Adrian. So in terms of becoming a member, then generally any public sector body can join us, or any not-for-profit organisation that's looking to procure services. I would suggest that I think on the bottom end of our webinar, when we send it out, there'll be a contact email address there, but you can also do that through the framework. Membership is free to join. There's no real conditions to it at all, but it does give you both access to all our compliant routes to market. It gives you access to us as heads of member services. So our role is that point of contact, is to talk through with people what their potential requirements are, initial requirements, or any information they'd like about us. And we're quite happy to do sort of an introduction to CHIC. So yeah, I would say get in touch with us and find out more. So I'm conscious of time. I'm not going to do the full spiel.
No, that's absolutely fine, Jackie. Thank you very much. You are right. We are at time for this webinar. There are some other questions that have been posed to us. What we will do is we'll get those questions answered by the panel, and then they'll be shared as part of the presentation slides and the recording of this webinar. I'd like to thank everybody for joining. I'd like to especially thank our panelists, Adrian Wright from Happy Energy, Steve Elmore from Freebridge, Jackie from CHIC. From all of us, thank you very much, and we wish you a cooler afternoon. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.